All right, good morning, everyone. Calling to order the Friday, May 9th meeting of the Council of Economic Advisors with a number of members here, just enough to make a quorum, thank goodness. So we'll go ahead and do just a roll call attendance. Bill, want to start?
Bill Mahoney.
Heidi Frail. Let's see, Adam.
Present.
Thank you, Matt.
Here.
Lise.
Here.
Mike.
Should page in the third to panelists.
Mike Wilcock, is he?
Yes.
Oh,
He declined to be.
so a couple more people are coming over and joining as panelists. It's a little hard to figure out. Really.
Mike declined. Oh, there he goes. Overdrive. There we go. And right. Oh,
Oh, Mike Wilcox is here. He has had trouble with the calendar invite.
Yeah.
he has.
Okay,
it.
so Mike,
Sorry.
you're here. Thanks
Yeah,
for joining
sorry,
us.
I just got elevated as a panelist, but I was on for
Awesome.
a while.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
Sorry
it
that
kept
we
saying you
missed you.
declined.
Okay, and then Rick Cookrush is here.
Great.
Hopefully joining us as a panelist any second now. No, he says well, it's kind of a weird message. All right, well, anyway, we're here and we're ready to go. So thanks everyone for being here, and thank you especially to our guest director of DPW, Karis Lustig, who is going to join us today to talk about the Envision project, which we all know is causing a big brouhaha in town. And we want to just make sure that as the council, we understand it and that it informs our thinking as we move forward and try to figure out the best way to implement our mission. So, Karis, if you're ready, I'll throw you. into there.
Sure. I don't have anything
Oh,
prepared,
do
so
you-
I'll just sort of,
you want I brought both of the.
yeah, I can
That's
go
it.
into that later. I think I'll just
Okay.
go into like a little bit of the background of it,
Yeah.
because I think that's, I think a lot of people kind of came into this towards the tail end of the project and just sort of trying, like where we are at least, and trying to just give a little bit of the background. But the town's been looking at doing work in the downtown for over 20 years. There are a couple of reasons why. The main reason initially was the intersections of Great Plain Ave, Highland and Dedham, and the intersection of Great Plain Ave, Chapel and Chestnut. In the 90s, the town did signalization there that never really worked. So for those who've been in town longer, you know that any issues with those signals prior to the construction in 2017 was a lot worse than it is today. And largely the initial project was to resolve the signalization issue as well as some coordination and flow issues. But the goal, bigger picture, was to really revitalize the downtown. I think, late 90s, early 2000s, economic concerns, particularly for small businesses and small communities. So they were looking at trying to find ways to integrate more features in the downtown, including seating, shade, greenery, and wider sidewalks. That was sort of the overall goal, as well as, like I said, coordinating flow within the downtown. So the town came up with about a 5-phase project to execute this work, broken down into about $5 million chunks to be executed over, to be frank, 25 years. And it was going to be funded exclusively from Chapter 90. So we would just stock up enough funds in Chapter 90. When we had enough money, we would do the next section. So the first section that was done was between those two intersections. They called it the INNY approach because it was sort of the inner core of the town, but it was also the most dysfunctional component of the downtown because of those signalized intersections. So that work was done and completed in 2018. And then those funds, we started stocking them up. And by 2020, we had sufficient funds to execute phase 2, which was referred to at the time as the Audi approach, which was looking at the rest of Great Plain Avenue. We decided in 2020, because the businesses were economically struggling, that this was not the time to do a large construction project, and especially because downtown outdoor dining was really popular. We didn't want to be creating dust and other construction debris while people were eating outside in parklets. So we delayed the project till 21 and brought it to the select board. We ended up talking to the select board at that time for about a year about that project. And generally speaking, the conversations were that the project we had was basically a 10-year-old design, and that wasn't what we thought the downtown would look like or should look like anymore. So the main feedback we got was that we wanted wider sidewalks. And that in the original project, parking was sacrosanct. We could not lose a single parking spot as part of that project. And due to the implementation of parklets and expansion of dining into town parking lots, we sort of took a different approach and said, well, clearly, maybe in some cases, parking isn't sacrosanct. So we can look at maybe trying to push curb lines and change orientations. Also at that time, I think there was a bigger push for pedestrian safety and multimodal safety. The town had adopted the Complete Streets protocol, I think around 2017, 2018 as well, which tells you to look at all modalities from a truck to a pedestrian to biker, someone in a wheelchair, and everything in between. And there was particularly concerns about the crossing at Pickering and the crossing at Maple, that those two intersections cross multiple lanes of traffic, so 4 lanes of traffic, as well as the basically covered 2 parking spots from visibility. And also, at the time, the merge unmerge happened right on those intersections. So not only was that where people were crossing, but it's also where cars were coming together at an intersection. So at that time, the select board at the time decided that they wanted to revisit this entire project. And that it's just the idea of designing one project and then executing it over 25 years at the time sounded like, oh, it'll be so easy. And then when we got to the second phase, it was like, nope, different. It was even the same people at the time, but different philosophy. The world just changed and the way we experience space changed. So that led us to go back out. So from 21 to 22, we were reimagining the project. By 22, we decided it wasn't working and we really needed to start from scratch. So in 23, we went to the select board with some questions on prioritization. The downtown corridor in Needham is very tight. Basically, the right of way goes from door front to door front. So there isn't a lot of play when it comes to moving space. Everything is sort of you have, 65, 75 feet, and then you decide what you put in those 65, 75 feet, and not everything will fit that everybody wants. There's just no way that will happen. So we wanted to find out what that priority was. We got a prioritization list back. We drafted a scope of service and we have pre-qualified vendors who do engineering services. And we solicit all 5 of them to provide us a scope of, to provide us a conceptual design and present to us to select where we wanted to go. 4 of the 5 chose to go. And we ended up actually putting a little bit of money behind it. Most RFP processes for an engineering firm, it's a pretty significant cost loss. And if you want any renderings or anything physical, like pictures, they won't give that to you in an RFP because that's too much money for them. So we did throw a little bit of money, a lot less than what it cost them to do the work, but a little bit of money at them so we could get some visuals, because obviously, particularly for the public, they wanted to have an idea of what direction we were going in. So we received 4. They presented publicly with the select board, and they presented to a selection committee on the DPW side. On both the select board and DPW, when queried, Environmental Partners, who has now become Apex, was the selected contractor at the time. They did clearly come in with the most bold vision, but were very clear that that was they were coming at the boldest, and that you can pare back bold. It's really hard to add to something and make it more, add more change. So we started that process. It took a while to get the Envision Needham committee going. And I think in hindsight, we were even talking about, did we meet prematurely or not? Because we had lots of vacant spaces on that committee, including up until now, we had 2 in the business community. We really had 3 because we couldn't have, one of the people could not attend for the majority of the time we met. And we certainly had quorum issues through the whole process, which I think is a challenge just with all the committees going on and all the work that we have. So we went through the process with Apex. They went to the Harvest Fair in October and started their public outreach then. We started meeting as a group in December and met twice a month until the month of May. And then they did several engagement events, including a walkthrough in the downtown for a month, where we had placards up. There were several guided walkthroughs. And then we've had 2, we had a meeting with the chamber, the Needham group in the chamber. And then we did 2 outreach sessions that concluded right about when somebody posted about this on Facebook. And cup half full. Now everybody in town knows about the project. So if we had a messaging problem before, we don't now. Everybody knows about it, so that won't be a problem moving forward. The main, I think, priorities of the project have been safety. I think that's the number one thing that they're focusing on, is making the downtown corridor as safe for all users as possible. Right now, there are challenges, I think, for all modes of transit, not just pedestrians. I think it is difficult for bicyclists to get through, and it's definitely difficult for vehicles as well. There's a lot of turning movements within the crosswalk boxes that we currently have, and it's not always clear who has the right of way when you are working through them, or if you're trying to take a left turn, and the person in the other lane is taking a left turn, you could have somebody whiz by on the right-hand side and not see them. So there's certainly challenges, I think, for all users in our downtown. The second item they have is sustainability. Environmental partners started off, as their name indicated, on the environmental services side, and only more recently got into transportation within the last 5 or 6 years. I think one of the reasons they did is they realized that transportation improvement is a key to environmental sustainability when it comes to like stormwater management, for example. So one of the things that we have in the downtown is we do have a history of flooding. When we had the August 2023 storm, we had about 1.5 feet of water over the intersection of Chestnut Chapel and Highland. The Walgreens parking lot was flooded with several feet of water, and several of the businesses on Chestnut Street, the whole corridor, including in the downtown, had water in their building. So we do have a drainage problem. And I think one of the things that came up in our last meeting, people were saying, you know, it's just the downtown. Well, the downtown doesn't really have any place for the water to go. And then that gets distributed through our water system throughout the entire town. So it doesn't just put pressure on the system within the downtown. It's where the flow goes within the town. We did some changes on that in that inner corridor, and we'd continue to do that to try to redirect the flow to areas that are less congested. So there's a sustainability component to it. And then there's also a placemaking, right? So I think one of the goals of the project is actually to enhance the economic vitality of the downtown by making it a place where people don't just go to one-stop shopping, but they don't just go out of their car, go to one particular store and get back in their car, but a place in which people feel more comfortable going through the downtown and can shop at multiple locations. And I think one of the ways I've envisioned it is, if you think of like Great Plain Ave as one giant like moat that sort of bisects the town, how do we bridge that gap? Because everybody in town, we don't have any drive-throughs in our downtown. So every single person who gets into a store gets there by walking, whether it's walking across the street or walking down the street, or walking 2 feet from a parking space. So those are the goals of the project. Pretty quickly, it became clear that the only way to resolve the intersections of Pickering and Maple were to narrow the roadway in town. And the only way to sort of bridge the gap between the common and, where CVS is also to narrow that roadway. You can't have a multi-lane intersection and one lane of traffic. Our downtown's too tight in order to fit everything in, and you need to have some staggering when you merge or unmerge into a turning lane. So it does make our downtown is a little challenging, I would say, to engineer. So that was one of the original discussions. One advantage of doing that versus just removing parking is you, in theory, can actually maintain the same amount of parking we have currently, or actually add parking in the downtown if you end up going from 4 lanes of traffic to 2 lanes of traffic. The other thing we talked about was, do we have enough parking in the downtown, too much parking in the downtown, parking in not the right spaces? And so the 2 concept plans, and maybe you could pull those up now, that we have from APAC sort of gave us 2 alternative approaches. And one approach, it's hard to see, unfortunately, on a screen, but one approach effectively widens the sidewalks significantly, maintains parking on both sides of the road, adds parking on Dedham, Chapel, and Highland, because you're narrowing the intersections. Creates a really large bump out right by where the common room is, for outdoor dining, a parklet, trees. And then it gives you, like I said, a much wider sidewalk. So I just want to talk about the sidewalk component of it. I did rewatch the videos in 2021 of the select board to confirm that I remembered everything correctly. And Pretty much every member of the board at that time had said that they would give up roadway for additional pedestrian space. I think at the time there was so much outdoor dining, the downtown was very vibrant, people were gathering there on a regular basis in the common because everything was happening outdoors, and I think they wanted to keep that momentum and keep people in our downtown. So, when we look at the downtown corridor, for, sidewalk expansion, I'll call it. We have included in both proposals a dedicated above, raised bike lane. Search 3 reasons for this. One, that was actually the #1 priority, averaged out across the entire select board when we did our analysis of how we wanted to use our right of way. The second is by, MassDOT standards, you are required to put in a bike lane if you have over 10,000 vehicles trips per day, which we do in this location. And it has to be a separated bike lane. So that either means raised, you need those stanchions that go in between, or you have a curb that goes in between, but it has to be separated. Now, that's not a standard they're imposing on municipalities that construct work themselves, but it is a standard they are imposing that follows any of their grant dollars. So chapter 90, not required. Town funds right now, not required. Again, this could change. But for any grant, federal or state, it would be required for us to add bike lanes. The other reason is when we did do the project in 2021, we did get a significant, I'd say 25 to 50 emails from residents who were upset that bikes were not included as part of the plan. Particularly from families who I think were very interested in family biking to the downtown. So probably people who lived within 2 miles. And that was also the rise of the cargo e-bike as an alternative form of transit. So I think there were enough people who see it down at Rosemary Pool who, want to bike in to get ice cream or run their errands, and don't want to compete with the traffic within Highland Avenue. So the design that we have currently, one of the thoughts I keep hearing is, what if no one uses these bike lanes, right? Like it's gonna be a waste of money, it's, So I've actually started thinking trying to ask people to think particularly when talking about pre-construction, but even after construction, about where the curb line is. Because if bike lanes don't work, which I hope they do, but if they don't, all you have to do is paint over the bike symbol and it becomes sidewalk. It becomes an area where you could have outdoor dining, it becomes an area with benches, it's not a lost space. It could continue to be space that's used for people. If you don't extend the curb line out that far, you're never going to move the curb again. Because when I talked about all the drainage, which is a significant portion of this project and the expense of this project, you can't modify the drainage once it's in. So to me, that curb line is what's sort of sacrosanct, and everything else that you do within that curb line, right? Lanes of traffic parking, for the vehicle side of it, or plantings, pedestrians, outdoor dining, those are sort of the 2 nodes that you have, and they're flexible, but you can't change that curb line once you put that in. So same thing with the traffic side is true for the pedestrian side. The other thing is, one of the struggles we've had with the downtown is it is a very sunny downtown, which in the warmer months can make it uncomfortable to, again, move from one space to another. And we've been looking at trying to get street trees or shade structures or something in the downtown, in order to improve that. Honestly, in talking about it with our former town engineer, Tony Delgazo, there has been zoning in the downtown now for over 20 years that would enable 3-story buildings in the downtown with housing on top and stores on the bottom. The thought had been that would actually provide shade, right? Like if you go from a single story to 3 stories, you would get some shade. So there was always sort of a goal of adding a little bit more shade into the downtown. What this enables us to do, adding bike lanes or effectively adding 5 feet of sidewalk on either side of the road, is it allows us to put in street trees that will be viable. So I've heard a lot of criticism about the street trees we currently have, which is valid, because we have such a shallow right of pedestrian space. There really isn't a lot of place to actually put trees. This would provide a lot more space for trees to go. So I've also referred to this bike lanes as street tree enablers. Because if you don't have that extra space, you can't fit healthy street trees in that have enough space and can grow large enough and don't block the storefronts. So that's sort of the plan. I wanted to show this plan because I think there's a lot of information, and this is this is the main plan. So there's a lot of information, if you go to alternative 2 out there, that's saying that like we're taking all the parking spots for bicyclists. So in this particular plan, I believe they had the downtown parking, we have like 102 spots. There are, I think, 6 or 7 of them that if we were to reline to be in compliance, would have to go. They're not, we don't have appropriate number of ADA spots. But this plan here, I believe, shows 108 spots altogether. So this idea that bike lanes and parking are in competition is not accurate. I guess you could say pedestrian space and vehicles are in competition. I think that's a more fair statement. Some advantages of some of these, this improvement in particular, is you get a lot more space. The sidewalks are wider in every scenario than they are currently. So you would have a lot more space to think about things like outdoor dining and even just some of the, like we noticed during COVID, some of the businesses have done some exterior improvements that have kind of eked onto the sidewalk, planters, some staging. Technically, that is not in compliance with our bylaws. You are not allowed to stage, except for those who are licensed for parklets, stage anything on the right of way because it's public space. We sort of not pushed on that. And I think one of the advantages, one of the things we'd like to hear from the business community is what would make this a great experience for them. So if having those amenities out there is a thing they want to continue, having more space obviously enables that and might make that more possible to make that more above board. So we want to hear those sorts of things, right? Like having more pedestrian space, having more seating, having more places for people to eat or outdoor dining, whether it's formalized outdoor dining affiliated with a specific restaurant where they provide service at the table, or if it's picnic tables around areas where there's a lots of takeout or ice cream or things that don't necessarily have a lot of indoor space to eat, but people may want to just eat outside of the restaurant instead of going home. We want to hear the positive. We'd like to start hearing what would make this good as opposed to like what people are scared of, because we want to integrate that into the project as well. And we don't want to forget that there could be some, there should be economic benefit to doing a project like this. The other thing I keep on hearing about is this concern about going from 2 lanes to 1 lane and how we're going to jam up the downtown. So I would like to remind everyone that Great Plain Ave is a 1-lane road that we move into 2 lanes by choice in our downtown. And what that basically does is it stores traffic in the downtown instead of a little bit on the outskirts of the downtown. If you go to this model, the traffic will just get stored in a different place. We're not adding or taking away capacity. If it was a 2-lane road that we were on either end that we were going to narrow down to 1 lane in our downtown, we would absolutely be creating a bottleneck. But we're not creating a bottleneck because we're actually removing the bottleneck we've created. So there should be a clear and consistent flow. And I believe over 20 years ago, the town of Wellesley had 2 lanes on 135 going through their downtown. And they converted down again to get much wider sidewalks for their business and economic vitality. They ended up converting down to 2 lanes of traffic and 2 lanes of parking spaces. So 4 lanes of car space. And again, I think it was a month of people being uncomfortable being stacked on either side of the downtown as opposed to within the downtown. And then within a month or 2, there were no complaints. So there are examples out there of where this has been done. And so driving through Wellesley would be a good example. You will notice it kind of stacks up back because you're not stacking 2 cars in parallel, but you're not stacking any more cars than you were before. You're just stacking them in a different orientation. And one of the things that we've gotten for feedback that we're going to continue to explore during the pause is more concise and clear traffic data. I believe right now the data is it takes 4 minutes and 20 seconds to get through our downtown. My gut is if we're talking about an increase in time, we're talking about a matter of seconds, not a matter of minutes. So we're not talking about going from like 4 minutes to 8 minutes, right? Which I think is what the fear is. But we'll be running more of that information. So this is one of the potential options. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. Some of the biggest enhancements are safety. Some of the comments we heard was like, it's not safe for people to park on Pickering and walk over to get pizza. Well, with a crosswalk that is configured this way, it should be much more comfortable for people to do that if they so choose. So that would be the main advantage of this particular project, even without losing any parking spaces. The other concept that was provided by environmental partners, so if you just toggle over to the other sheet, is effectively the same thing. There's a couple features that this one has. So you'll notice that they have staggered basically bump outs into what is currently parking or was parking in the other design. And staggering these bump outs, the idea is to give a traffic calming effect. So, you know, we always talk about kind of the peak travel time and how congested the downtown is. But there are lots of times during the day where the downtown isn't particularly congested and people can fly through the downtown, which is not safe for pedestrians either. So the staggered bump outs will provide the driver, it's a traffic calming effect. It just feels like it's not straight, even though it is. And so they should go slower. And again, we're not talking about people being jammed in the downtown. We're talking about people driving at like 20, 25 miles an hour versus driving at 30, 35 miles an hour, right? And just the data that we know on crashes, the faster you go, the more dangerous it is for somebody who gets hit. So going at a slower speed makes you more aware of who's moving through the downtown, so you can stop when something happens, and it's safer if there is an accident. So that would be the reason for those bump outs. Additionally, it provides more opportunity for additional green space. Or again, that could be like a really large bumped out outdoor dining area or a little park. So it provides some opportunity. It also provides some pervious surface within the downtown, which we don't currently have. And we would obviously put in significant drainage features there where we could potentially capture some drainage and retain it in that area, as opposed to just diverting it to other parts of town, which we do currently. So those are sort of the two different designs they're working on. I believe this scenario brings the parking down to 68 spots from 102. So I've heard something like, oh, we're losing 100 spots, we're losing 50 spots. I've heard a lot of numbers. But those are the numbers that are in this particular design. And then I just want to talk about the pilot. So it was envisioned that I think I've heard from a few people like, oh, you never thought there'd be pushback. And I was like, no. I was actually surprised we didn't get pushback earlier. So I definitely, when you make a change, anyone, like there's always going to be concern. So when we met with the chamber and they were much more positive than I had assumed they would be, I was actually surprised. And then when we started getting further along and we got pushback, that made sense to me. One of the reasons behind doing a pilot is to provide proof of concept largely to people who don't believe, right? I think I've heard concerns that they think the word pilot means untested, or they think the pilot means experimental. None of the things that are being proposed here from a traffic design and engineering perspective are experimental. So they know how they're going to work. I mean, there may be like a little tweak of a curb line by an inch or two, but it's not a matter of whether or not it will work. It's a matter of whether or not people like it and they feel comfortable in it, and particularly those who are concerned. That's really what the goal of the pilot is. But I think that actually put people more, from talking to some of the businesses, I think it actually put people more in unease than if I just decided to start like the construction project, because it's just not a thing that is as common around here. So we're going to be doing, like I said, a little bit more traffic analysis. I think initially we had thought the pilot would do some of that traffic. We'd be able to do that traffic analysis through the pilot. Now we will be providing more information as part of this project of, you know, travel times, trip times, that sort of thing. Another thing we're evaluating is a second party traffic study evaluation. We did that with the original project just because it is a sensitive area, and do that pre-pilot. And then the other questions, or the questions that keep coming up to me that I think might be more helpful for you, are really on the economics of this, right? And so I can talk infrastructure all day long, and I can talk anecdotally about economics, about why it makes sense to me that if you're walking by 3 stores, that you would shop at 3 stores versus just going in your car and out of your car. But I think what I heard was a lot of concern and skepticism about whether or not this would be beneficial or detrimental to our businesses. And I got a lot of anecdotal information from other communities that have done traffic calming features or road diets. I think one of the concerns or the questions we've had is, are they getting information from road diets that happened recently while there's economic stress, period, right? Not just in those areas, or are they getting information because of a road diet? So I think that's what we're looking at. And one of the questions I've asked JP about this is like, do we need to do an economic study, or do we need something more on the economic side that says, you know, parking lots and then walking to a site or whatever it is, the dynamic actually, you know, engages your downtown, increases your revenues, all that kind of stuff. Because ultimately the goal of this project, I got annoyed when WBZ presented it as like the town wants to add bike lanes, because that's not what this project is at all. But bike lanes are part of the right of way, but the town wants to reactivate its downtown and provide a space where people feel comfortable walking and engaging with our businesses. And that is actually like one of the main focuses of this project. Clearly the message has been missed, and so that may be less on working with our consultants on the engineering and planning side, but potentially looking at somebody on the economic development side.
Thank you, Karis. I have to say that I have heard Karis speak many times, and I'm always sort of floored about how coherent and cohesive she can be with no notes. It's
do a
just
great job.
astonishing.
Thank you.
So like amazing. And I think the story that she's just told is really, really helpful. Not only for the town at large, and I sort of wish that we had any public attendees to have heard that. I guess what strikes me right off the bat is that the common theme that I hear is that throughout time, our small independent businesses are struggling. Like from the inception of this project 20 years ago. And that seems unchanged, frankly. And what I guess what that says to me, or what it leads me to believe, is that there are needs that are not being met in their environment, that the town is trying to massage, to change in some way, and we haven't been able to do that. And I think that there is a pretty significant bridge between what the businesses want and what they talk about. So, and I think it maybe is something that we need to look at more closely, because it sounds to me like what they want is more customers, but what they're saying they want is more parking. And those two are not necessarily the same thing. So I see a little bit of a gap there. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that the pilot has been, the select board met just before town meeting the other night and talked about, the intense public scrutiny that this has been receiving. And I think the intense misunderstanding of the project and anxiety and fear that are surrounding it. And so we voted to postpone implementation of the pilot for at least 6 months so that we could take more time to talk about it and study it and get feedback and potentially, win some hearts and minds before moving forward with something that's going to make people anxious. So we're still holding our public hearing on May 13th, but we're doing it with the understanding that the pilot has been delayed. And then I also just want to throw out there as a discussion topic, the idea of some parking realignment that I personally feel like maybe we should talk about along with this program. Because the town did do a couple of parking studies not too long ago that said that while we actually have plenty of parking, we're not using it efficiently. And that, we have employees who are maybe taking up some street parking or some otherwise, parking lot parking, and maybe we could realign our permit parking and make our parking easier to spot and the restrictions more obvious so that people can use parking appropriately, and that would free up spaces for customers who want to use it. So anyway, thank you, Karis, and I'll open it up for discussion. I see that Adam has his hand up. Adam, you're muted if you're talking.
I know. I'm also en route, and my big thumb on a small device takes a second to unmute. So thank you very much, Kara. That is an excellent understanding, a very detailed, thorough understanding. I've had an opportunity to, to speak to a number of businesses. I know that a while ago we had talked about some changes, in the downtown, and it does it does seem like it does, the proposal doesn't just seem, it is trying to merge or combine multiple solutions to multiple problems simultaneously. And I understand each one, but if we're talking about this and you're positioning or framing this as like a boon to business, then we need to focus a little bit more on what the business needs are. And although we, we allow like 3 stories, and you talked about how there was anticipation many years ago at the, at the rezoning, that rezoning failed and did not materialize in the additional shade to cool down the town center as a result of development. Uh, it failed because there's just not enough density. And I think if that is the primary goal, I think it makes sense to, to slow this process down and to reconsider, the goals. If there are infrastructural improvements that need to be made, then I think we need to identify the top priorities of those. But I think in terms of zoning, one of the things that I'd like to see the planning board pursue is by special permit, allowing 50 units per acre, which, in terms of a model, some people on the committee may remember the proposal that Jay Dorenzo had at 888 Great Plain that has come before the planning board informally. And to take that zoning regimen and some of the design concept, which would allow a 4th floor, but set it, further back. If we were able to create that zoning change from Warren down to Linden, then over time, over the course of many years, I think we'd see, a change. In the meantime, the pandemic, everybody was outside, and now the pandemic's, over for several years, and we've all retreated back to our ordinary routines. But if we're able to program Greensfield in the town center, that helps to create a sense of destination. And the change of uses could be considered, but it's certainly a change of the other dimensional regulations would in time turn over what people see as a blight of retail, where they complain about too many banks and secondhand shops and salons, and there is not a lot of gift shops, and there's not a lot of diversity of the type and kind and experience of retail. But that comes not from shrinking a road or a road diet. It comes from having enough foot traffic that's derived by reasons to be in the downtown, namely residential units that people are on foot. It will take cars off the road because we will reduce the parking, requirements and so on. And then lastly, as a cyclist, I've 2 friends that were hospitalized in awful accidents. One was run over by a school bus, and the other was run over elsewhere. And they were run over, and it's interesting, bike lanes are great, provided people actually obey them and check their shoulders on a turn. And no amount of bike lane and visibility, well, I shouldn't say no amount, but bike lanes can be helpful, but the problem is people don't necessarily check their shoulder. And I would just not put, like, my son is 12. I'm not allowing him on Chestnut Street on his bike or in the downtown. He's on the sidewalk, even though that may be a faux pas. And when I've been with him on the bike while I'm walking our dog, whether with a friend or my wife, there's never been an issue of the width of sidewalk. People were always able to get around. So I think we are dealing with a number of different needs, trying to mix and merge them. And I think there are some specific needs that the businesses have. Parking, you may not, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the planning board applied for a state grant and received funding recently for another parking study. I hope it'll pick up in the good work, Heidi, you're probably referring to from Stantec's more recent study. And, our goal is to, revise the parking standard in the zoning bylaw, because we just end up waiving, by special permit. The
Yeah.
challenge with that is both demand and supply. Like, we waive because there's just not enough parking around, and we also think that there's not as much demand for parking, but that oscillates the last one.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks. I wanna hear what Bob has to say as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I would just recommend that any proposal start with the added parking. I just, that to me seems like that should be the baseline. And any of the other benefits that come along after that are great. Yeah, I was at that meeting last Thursday, and obviously parking's important to landlords, it's important to tenants, but what Adam was just saying is very true. It's also very important to the town. Any special permit application always centers around parking. So I don't think the town can be in a position where they're saying that parking is expendable, because it's not. So I think there needs to be
I
a
don't think that the
consistency
town
there.
has said that, Bob. I think that they've been looking at options and different ways of moving around. I don't think that, I mean, both at every presentation, there has been a plus parking as well as a minus parking option. So I just want to make it clear that the town is not dismissing parking. It's perhaps a reorganization is required, but the plans themselves have actually always shown an option that adds parking. So I just want to be clear that the town, that's not the town's position.
Right, no, and what I'm saying is I would get rid of the plan that removes parking. I don't think that's gonna.
I guess I want to stress to everyone on this phone call and I mean, generally to the public, that this is like, we're still in the concept portion of this project. And I think it's important for us to keep our minds open to possibilities. And it is hard to do that if we just unilaterally take a whole slew of options off the table. We look at options that we know maybe won't work because we're trying to expand our horizons, right? And to think about how everything works together. Looking at something that takes away parking is just as important for our minds as it is to look at things that add parking. So I guess what my emphasis is just that we're just looking at possibilities right now. Neither of these things that we're actually looking at are actual plans. They're concepts of plans. So I just want to remind everyone that even though there's been a lot of discussion about these and people are already saying no, there is no like actual plan on the table.
Heidi, can I just add to that too?
Yeah.
So, and I actually had follow-up because I didn't know the planning board was doing another parking study. So I will, I'll catch up with Alex on that and Lee. The parking study that we do have, so two things. One, it shows that the peak parking demand for the town is at 6 o'clock on a Friday, I believe, which is when the vast majority of our retail shops are not open. So there isn't a direct competition on the peak, at least right now, for parking in the downtown. But what it also showed, which is something we have discussed with JP and we've talked in the committee, is that we are overserved. There are private parking lots in town that are underutilized, particularly during that peak period. So let's think the banks, for example. We have many private parking lots that are bank owned that they may be interested in making available to the public during that peak time. So there may be other ways of offsetting parking that aren't inherently street parking. So I think there's other modules like out there. And then I think one of the things that we've talked about that would be part of this pilot, or maybe we'll do it even sooner, just in discussing, is the feedback we got from the last parking study was that our wayfinding signs were not adequate, which I agree. And we have a lot of confusing signage. So our permit parking signage, for example, we internally were having a conversation about the parking spots at the bank that are permit parking. And it says permit parking from 8 to 2. Does that mean the rest of the public can park there after 2? And we were asking that question as the people who put the signs up. So if we're asking that question, the public is asking that question. So I think we know that we need to do better in terms of getting people to the parking spots we currently have, because if the parking studies are consistently showing us that there isn't a congestion parking issue within the downtown, but people are perceiving that we are, then we're not doing a good job of getting people to those parking spaces. And then the second thing is, if the parking space is on the opposite side of Great Plain Ave from the destination you're going to, because again, I think of Great Plain Ave like a moat, that could be part of a factor of why people are not, feel like there's no parking. Whereas if it is easier to get from one side of Great Plain Ave to another by vehicle or by person, like by walking, then it might make people feel like it's less of an inconvenience to park on the opposite side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
mean, all parking isn't created equal.
Right.
Yeah, for
And,
sure.
getting into a public-private sharing of parking, that's a whole degree of difficulty that is, pretty complicated.
Bob, can I ask you to share your experience? Because I would say the property that you are a part of in the center is like where Fresco is, right? That
Yep.
strip. So that
Yep.
strip has the kind of expansive pedestrian way that we're sort of thinking about for the rest of the center. Can you talk a little bit about how that impacts the property? And I see
Yeah,
that
well,
Liz has her
and
hands
that-
up and we have very little time, so I'm gonna ask you to be brief and concise, but still, I'm really interested.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll cut to the chase of it. We fought hard to replicate every space that we lost on the street. And we made it clear that we were able to count that what is now on-street parking as parking for the building. And it wasn't easy. I'll just leave it at that. But we
But
got
did
it
it
done.
impact the businesses in some way to make that change?
I'm sorry?
But did it impact the property that, like, to
Oh,
having
it was a
that-
huge improvement,
okay,
a
and can
huge
you talk
improvement,
about that
but
a
we
little
didn't,
bit?
it wouldn't have been if we lost parking, that's for sure.
Okay, I understand the parking issue. I'm curious about the impact of the expanded sidewalk and pedestrian way on the property and like the way people view the
Yeah.
property, potential lessees
yeah.
view the property,
Home run.
home run.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we can
Um,
find a way to trade off to make parking accessible, you're saying that having that amenity of the widened sidewalk and pedestrian area is a home run for you as a property owner, but also for the business as a lessee.
Yeah, but let's be clear. I mean, like if we had to replicate that parking over on Pickering Street, those businesses would be they'd be shut down right now, right? So I mean, it's like it's
Right, I understand that it's
you know.
dependent in your mind, and probably probably in reality, like on some sort of accommodation with parking. I guess I'm just trying to separate the two issues, like assuming the parking comes along in some fashion and we have to figure that out, and that's a huge hurdle.
If it's plentiful and well located and we can figure out the rest of the stuff, I'm totally behind this, without a doubt.
Okay, all right, great, please, thank you, Bob.
I just want to make one more point and then I'll be quick about this. I was at the meeting last Thursday and that was very informative for me because we heard people who have other perspectives outside of Needham. And we heard from several business owners who have experienced where these bike lanes have gone in and have really been detrimental to their businesses. So, and as you mentioned, there could be extenuating circumstances why that's the case. But I think we need to take that seriously and we need to look into that. I think we need to study that a little bit harder because these are communities like Brookline and Somerville, which are even more, I would say, conducive to pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic, more so than Needham. And if it's not working there, then I don't think it would be wise for us to just simply ignore that. So that's my
Right.
last. point.
Oh, and I think that's exactly why we postponed the implementation of the pilot, so that we could address exactly those issues.
Correct.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I mean,
Please.
total support of that as well.
Great.
I'll be quick because I know we're coming up. And Karis, thanks for coming today. I feel like you could come back almost every week, with this group, to fill us in. And I do hope as the, suspension of the plan, you will be back multiple times. One, what can the EAC do to help you in getting the feedback that you need from businesses? Because we are, JP, Heidi and I worked closely on subgroups and listening tours that we will, we're not gonna have time to roll out today, but as we go out, is there like a set of questions that we could come up with and really reach out? I do think we could do another listening. We could, when you have those concepts to put in front of people, I think we'll get a much better turnout now, given the amount of awareness on this. And then one thing I don't think you're gonna have time to talk about today, but one thing that is popping up are those delivery trucks. And
Yeah.
in neither of those plans did I, that is really, I do think about that. That is a conundrum. Like, how are they going to pull over if you do a road diet, where do they go? And that was really my, I've sat in a lot of this, so I don't need to take up any more of your time, but those are the two things, given this group, that where we're supposed to be advocating and listening to businesses, that I feel are important.
Can I say one fun, I've been to that Pickering crosswalk, trying to cross and wondering whether that cheese peach was worth my life. That's a very tough place to go. But there's a lot of other businesses that I go to and some of them are just in and outs. I don't want to go park at Walgreens to drop a package off at the UPS store. But I'll be parking at Walgreens to get my hair cut, because that's a half an hour trip. So trying to blend the two, you want this walking so you can go to the clothing stores there, but I don't wanna. So trying to balance my safety crossing the street. Can we do 15-minute parkings?
Oh, yeah.
in
Yeah,
front of
that's
each-
one of the things I forgot to mention was the curb management side of it. So
Yeah.
you can do and the nice thing about that is you can, if you structure it correctly, it can be flexible, right? Because one of the things we struggle with when we talk about building, I think Dan Matthews put it, like, we're building a downtown for the next 100 years, right? So we want to get it right. Like,
Right.
right, when you put the infrastructure down, you don't want to go back and rip it up a couple of years ago. We know communities who have done that. We don't want to repeat that. So we want to be able to do it where it's flexible, where we have like outdoor dining, where you're likely to have a restaurant, but you might not have a restaurant there in the future, right? Like, that's where you're balancing. And I think the same thing with curb management, right? Like, if you have a store, CVS, pizza place, something that is conducive to quick turnaround, having different parking, because right now, you likely have somebody who's doing a 2-hour parking spot, getting their haircut down the street, parking in front of the pizza place.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so you gotta blend the two, so
Yeah.
it's gonna be hard to make everyone happy. But yeah, that's where it gets a little difficult. And the other thing I don't know too is, where are the lefts downtown? How are you handling the lefts when?
So right now, we're not handling them. None of the lefts, except for the one on Chestnut and on Chapel, are designated left, like exclusive left
So if
turn.
I'm coming down in front of CVS, I want to take a left on Chapel, that will remain.
So it'll remain, but it'll be one lane.
So am I gonna get, well, that's the traffic, that.
Yeah,
that's to me
so
seems
so
like
it'll
it's
be
gonna
lead lag, right? So the green will run on one level, like it does now. The green stops on one side and goes the other side, so it clears out some of the left turns. Because right now, if you're going to take a left, if you're going straight on Great Plain Ave and you get stuck behind a car that's taking a left,
Right,
you could be there for quite a while. And that person taking a left is really waiting for all the traffic on the right-hand side to empty out, because if the person taking a left on the other side is there, they don't know if someone's passing them on the right. So what you'll do is you'll have 2 lanes of traffic. Ideally, your left, someone else on the other side takes a left, and then you both go.
right, but right now, it's
Yeah.
much easier to take a straight if you can go, it's 2 lanes, you can take a guy taking a left.
You can go straight and right, or you can go straight and left.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, all right, okay.
But there's not enough space in the downtown for everyone who's going straight to go in the right-hand lane, which is why we don't have a dedicated left lane.
Okay.
Gang, we're pretty much out of time. I wanna say thank you to Karis for joining us. I think that she is just, like, there's just so much knowledge there. And there are so many things to know about this project, and I wanna encourage, I know we've talked about breaking up into subgroups, and we've talked about doing listening tours, but you don't have to wait. We're all members of the community, we're all here because we are interested in this subject and this, and helping our community flourish. So join the meeting on May 13th. That's in Powers Hall. There's gonna be feedback there, even if you don't have feedback that you want to share, or you don't want to make yourself, a focus of this thing. Listen to what the businesses are saying, but also the residents. I think we need to hear from everyone. This plan needs to work for everyone. We don't want to build something that is only good for until the next thing comes along, So please reach out to your friends and neighbors, make sure that they understand where we are with this thing, get them involved, have them sign up for the news flashes, et cetera, et cetera. Bring your influence to bear. If there's feedback that you hear, please share it. And then stay tuned because we'll be highlighting more ways to get involved. I also want to say that Envision is one project, but there are many more that the town is undertaking. The Highland Ave project it's a long way off, but as we know, there's no amount of advancement that's enough. So we need to start thinking ahead to the projects that we can help engage the community and even those that appear to be like in the faraway future. So with that, it's 9 o'clock. I'm gonna call it, but I appreciate everyone being here and participating. I would appreciate a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thanks,
Aye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. You do a good job at this.